Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Precious Metal Gents podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Zan. I'm here with my co host Brian. And today we are going to take a look at 1996 Select Certified in football and baseball. We're going to do our recurring segments prior to that. But before we even get to those, I think Brian wanted to air a grievance that he had, or maybe give us a rant about a particular green card. So, Brian, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I had a traumatic experience with when it comes to cards with PWCC. So when I saw this card that was listed on there at auction, it's done in 2 days. You have extended bidding started in a couple of days. It was the PMG, the 97 PMG green, Steve Young BGS 7.5, and usually with these BGSs, I would say I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it seems like the vast majority of them, especially the greens, are fake serial numbers. So they're real PMGs. They just had a serial number from, in my opinion, from what I've read and researched, serial number added out of, they're out of the pack. They're not pack pulled. Backdoor copies and the serial number added. So they weren't pulled from a pack. This is a perfect example of it. I had a situation last year where I was to purchase a Antonio Freeman, found out after the auction ended that it was fake, and I had a pretty bad run-in with PWCC. So you notice a lot of these cards on PWCC, a lot of them in BGS slabs, really all of them, because PSA does not certify these non-conforming serial numbers. So I felt the need to make a post. Usually I leave it up to you. You do a pretty good job of listing this, but this is a card that when I was collecting Steve Young, I kind of got at him just to focus more on the Packer stuff. But I was collecting Steve Young, and this would have been a card that I would have been really interested in. For any Steve Young collector, you see something like this. Maybe if you don't know so much about the serial numbering, you might think, wow, it's only at $1,800 right now at auction. You might want to place a bid. Unfortunately, PWCC continues to sell these. It is I shared a story post about the serial number on this card. It is definitely a fake serial number. If you looked at my story, you can see the way that the ones and the zeros are pretty easy tells. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to that, Zan.
Yeah, so I know I went on Brett's podcast last year to Stacking Slabs podcast to talk about precious metal gems, and we talked about the serial numbers, but you can tell pretty easily when there's a fake green because the width of the zero is significantly wider than a real one's zero, which is a bit more narrow. But every number 0 through 9 looks different on the fake ones than they do from the real ones, and it becomes second nature to kind of know what's fake and what's not. So my big problem is actually specifically with this card, and not necessarily just the green PMGs being sold in general on PWCC Weekly, which is a problem, but seems to be less so this year than it did last year. But this card was auctioned back on PWCC Weekly in 2022 and went for $30,000, and then it was auctioned again on PWCC Premier back in August 2023, went for $9,750, and now it's being auctioned yet again. At one point, Instagram user AZ Sun Investments bought a copy of the card. I think it was after the $30,000 sale, submitted it to PWCC. I believe it got pulled down temporarily. He then listed it on eBay at some point and included in the description of the card and in the images a letter from a Beckett representative that said, well, we stand by the fact that this is real. We stand by our grade. We stand by the authenticity. PSA would not certify or grade this card. So to me, I'm not saying PWCC knows that it's fake and is selling it, but it does seem that there's enough doubt around a card that's a 5-figure card. Like, there is some doubt about it. I think nobody would argue that there are questions that need answers. And so I think my real problem is with the fact that it's still up for sale, despite the fact that PWCC has been alerted to this in the sense that they've read stories I've posted about this card, etc. So I think just a little bit of a frustration. If you are listening to this and you're planning to go for that card, I would probably recommend that you don't, unless you don't care about whether the card itself is a pack pulled copy or not. But that's something we noticed, and we figured it would be prudent to call that out, just so that anyone listening, we can save you $10,000 or more.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that you said. I have two issues with it. My experience with the fact, like you said, that they're actually out there and BGS continues to certify them. Maybe you could get into the whole like coloring with a Sharpie and them doing all that too. So, I mean, it's not like they're really trying to be more, better grading with these PMGs. They're actually getting more loose, it seems, whereas PSA is tightening up, and they'll gladly decertify anything that they, would suspect would be a non-conforming serial number. So we're going to get into that at a later episode, the details about those. But like you said, specifically with PWCC, with my experience with them, they're not very helpful when it comes to someone purchasing something or questioning something that's listed. Like you referenced the with BGS, it's enough that, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, BGS, they sell a lot of these. They sell enough of these where they have a lot of people not paying when they find out that they're fake, or they have enough people complaining about it, where you would think that they would find a way to figure out what's going on with these, since they are big items. I mean, these aren't like $100 cards. These are, like you said, five-figure cards or more. So I just feel like as a selling platform, they need to do better. I hope that they do better and they start looking into this a little bit more. And as far as BGS, they need to start either authenticating cards or figure out what else they want to do, if it's VHS tapes or magazines or something else. But they're not doing a very good job of authenticating cards either. So there's two different issues for me. It's from the collector standpoint, and then also from like these auction houses and these companies that are supposed to be protecting the buyer.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will give a special shout out to Nick, who goes by the Wharf Sports Cards on Instagram. And I know he has something of a business relationship with PWCC. I'm not sure exactly what it entails, but he has a consignment business that goes through PWCC. And a while back, I think he had consigned 3 Bills green PMGs. I think it was Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and maybe Bruce Smith. It was 3. I can't remember the players. I know one was Thurman Thomas. He messaged me about him. The Thurman Thomas was numbered 010. Looked fake to me. And oddly enough, a friend had just gotten the real PSA graded version of that green Thurman Thomas 010. Put them side by side. It was very clear. Nick stood to make a huge commission on all 3 of those, but he did the right thing and he took them down. So I think that, that's what I would like to see more of across the board. But, time will tell, I guess. So, well, let's not spend any more time on that. We got to save a little bit for the 1997 Metal Universe episode in the future. So let's go ahead and get into Mail Day. Brian, you have a new PC. What is it?
Yeah, I started a new PC, and I guess I have to give a little bit of background as to why I went into collecting CC Sabathia. It's a player that I always wanted to collect. The issue for me was being a Brewers collector. Though he's significant for the team, which I'll talk about in a minute, there's just not many cards of him from the short period of time that he spent in Milwaukee. So if you're a baseball fan, or even if you're just a sports fan in general, and you remember Sabathia coming over to the Brewers during 2008 season, mid-season trade, he pitched 17 games for the Brewers during that season. And during that stretch, a lot say that it was, one of the best 17-game stretches in the modern era. Modern meaning like, since the 90s. Based not solely on the statistics alone, but just on the significance to what it meant for the team. The Brewers weren't in the playoffs since 1982, and his 17 games in the second half really carried them with all the complete games and the shutouts that he had, specifically the last game of the year where they beat the Cubs in a must-win to get in the playoffs. So he holds a lot of the hearts of the Brewer faithful here. And I always joke that he could probably run for mayor in Milwaukee and get elected, even though he spent, just a few months here. But people in Milwaukee love him. I know that he said a number of times that he loved his time in Milwaukee and that if things could have been different in a different universe, he would have liked to finish his career there. But, with modern baseball and, a team like the Yankees, he left and there's a lot of pressure on him being a young guy at the time, pretty early in his career, coming off of a Cy Young Award the year before. He got a lot of money from New York and the Brewers couldn't compete. So I always wanted to represent him in my collection. I think he's probably my second favorite Brewers pitcher of all time. I'm a big Ben Sheets fan, even though Ben Sheets wasn't necessarily as good of a pitcher, but that's another topic. I started this collection to really focus on just key cards of his from really all teams that he played for, and which is Brewers, Yankees, or Indians. So I want to really focus on his bigger stuff as an Indian. So the first one I picked up was 1999 Finest Gold Refractor, his rookie out of 100. It's in a BGS 8. There is a corner grade that's 7.5. I don't really see it. I mean, obviously you can hit a bad corner grade on that deckled edge for that card, but it's got a edges grade of a 10, and it's got a surface grade of a 9.5 and a centering grade of a 9.5. So the subgrade being a 7.5, I thought there was a value in that. There's a few of them listed, and it's out of 100, so they do pop up sometimes. But this card really looked clean to me, and I wanted to start with that one. The 99 Finest Gold was a big rookie for him because he didn't have a lot of rookie cards. He's got the Bowman Chrome, gold refractor out of 25, I think it is, and then it's this one. So out of 25 one's really tough to find. So this was a big card to start the PC, and then the 2000. I just recently picked up the 2008 Superfractor of his as well. So I got those two cards. That one's his first Yankees card as well. So moving into the Brewers stuff from this past week, I picked up two separate, well, they're really one lot of cards, but two separate sets. There's the 1999 Finest Gold Refractors, essentially the team set. I'm missing one of the Brewers, but I got the Valentine, the Cirillo, the Burnett's, and the Jenkins in that one. So I'm missing, I believe there's two more that I'm missing from that set. Oh, the Marquise Grissom, the Cirillo, the Vina, the Burnett's, and the Valentine. And I can't remember what player I'm missing for that. But when it comes to team sets, especially with the Brewers, there was a lot of players that are in those team sets that are just really common, and they didn't really make much of an impact or even play on the team. So to me, I just kind of avoid them because the card itself is, makes the value of just a common player go up anyway. I just don't want to spend the money on a guy who really never played like that. Antoine Williamson in the PMG set. Like, there's just no point to spend hundreds of dollars on that card because he played like 20 games. So it's the same with the 99 Finest Gold Brewers. They're all pretty good condition. They all got the coating still on them, which is nice. And I picked up the 98 Bowman's Best Atomics. I got 3 of those. I can't remember how many are in that set, but I think I might be one away from that as well. It's the Jenkins, the Grissom, and the Burnett's of those. And those are just beautiful cards. I know they're really popular, so a lot of people listening have some of those. These are actually the first copies that I have of that card that I've actually ever had in person. I mean, I've seen them at shows all the time, but I've never actually owned any 98 Bowman's Best Atomics in football or baseball. So these are the 3 I got, for the first time in this my entire life of collecting. I want to get the Packers from that set, so I'm working on that. And then with that lot of cards, I got a 2000 Stadium Club first day issue refractor Jeremy Burnett's. And what those are is you have the first day issues, which I think are out of 200, and then you got the refractors from that set, which are out of 25. And just a really nice card, really cool design. So it was a good price. I picked that up. And then the same week, it was really a little bit earlier last week, I got another PMG for my Brewer set, another 98 PMG, and that was the Steve Woodard. So really one away from that set of the guys I'm going to buy, which would be the Jaha. So I'm looking for the Jaha from that set. Again, I'm going to skip the Antoine Williamson, but that would complete the set for me. So my pickups from this past week.
That's impressive that you can not get the Williamson, because I'm such a completionist that, like, I'm trying to get the 98 Patriots set. I need McGinnis and I need Robert Edwards, who's in his UGA jersey, hanging out in space. He had played 2 years, basically had one good year for the Patriots, but I feel like I have to get it just because he's in the team set. So that's good that you can refrain from picking up Antoine Williamson. I did want to ask you, said you got the 99 finest golds, still have the peels on them. Are you a peel or no peel guy?
I don't know. I go back and forth with it. Like, I kind of like the peels. I like the concept of getting the cards with the peel on it, and then if it's a card that I'm actually going to grade, I'll look at it and see where you can see a lot of the fingerprints on the peel. I'll just peel the thing off and then send it in. I've done that before. If it's a card I'm grading, if I'm not grading it, like I just leave them on because they're packed fresh that way. I guess really the chalk up to I don't really have much of an opinion on it. I don't like seek out a card specifically if it's got a peel, and I won't buy it if it doesn't because it was like altered or something, So I guess I'm just in between.
I bought a 99 finest gold refractor of Vlad Guerrero a while back with the peel on PSA 7, and I cracked it out and peeled it. Do you crack out and peel, or do you just leave it if it's slab peeled or unpeeled? Sorry.
I did it one time. I can't remember if it was I don't have the car anymore. It was either a Griffey or a Thomas 95 or 96, the Intimidators finest refractor. It was either one of those two. I think I got one that was not peeled, and I peeled it and then sent it in and got a higher grade. But that's when I was just trying to get a high. I would do it like if I'm trying to get a higher grade. Otherwise, I just don't care. If it's an old slab too, that's another thing. So if it's in like some yellowed old slab, like I've seen some of those come in, like someone got graded a long time ago, then maybe I would, if I'm going to crack it anyway, then I might just crack it. And if it's got a peel on it, I'll just peel it off, because chances are if it was grade back then, they probably didn't, even think about cleaning the thing off. So
it's probably true.
I mean, it's kind of a roundabout answer with the whole thing, but, and then with one more thing about your, the completion aspect, I am like, I do get kind of like, weird about that. Like I don't really have the whole set unless I get all the players, but like Robert Edwards, to me, I remember when he came out of college, he was a big draft pick for the Patriots. And I feel like he has a little bit more of an impact. Well, he has a lot more of an impact than like Antoine Williamson did, obviously, for the Brewers. But like guys that I'll get guys that weren't very good or didn't play much. Like I've fought with like getting the Ben McDonald 97 finest Brewers Central Credential, 97 Essential Credentials Brewers, because there's only two players in that set. It's Cirillo and him. But McDonald was actually like a legit player. So, I mean, I'll get him. He only played for 1 year for the Brewers too, I think. But like Antoine Williamson, like seriously, like 20 games, and he hit like 200 or something. I can't do it.
If the set wasn't 98 PMG, maybe, but it's gonna be like 3, 4, 5, maybe $500 by that. Right. There's just no way you can justify that. So, well, that's quite the mail day, and you and I have had some actual pretty big developments lately on the PC front. We both shut down a relatively big PC each in the past few weeks. Tell us why you did who it was, why you did it, and kind of what your plan is going forward.
I partially blame you for it, because whenever I'm gonna sell cards or shut something down on the PC or try to figure out if I should focus on it, I always bounce the idea off you. It's in a good way though. It's not like you made me do it to do a bad thing. I'm happy with the decision, but it came to the point where it was actually something you said on. It was like, I think it was our first show where you mentioned it kind of stuck with me, where anytime, I think it was with Randy Johnson, they're always going to take a back seat to like Favre or one of these other guys picks up or a card pops up. And it's not like you don't want to collect them anymore. It's just that I said this, I think, on last episode, where like with these cards, you kind of have to really start getting a focus, because you can go crazy. There's a lot to collect of a player, but then there's also, if you want to get into the bigger stuff, it costs a lot of money. And when those cards pop up, you just don't have much time to plan and think about it. It's not like you can just go get a 1954 Hank Aaron any time of the day, any hour. It's just that when you see something that comes up, or you're thinking about going after a couple cards available, you got to make a quick decision. With me, it was the Kurt Warner. He doesn't fit. I've collected him for a long time. A couple of years ago, I started buying his better cards. I was trying to curate a collection where it was focused on like different sections of his PC. So like, or sections of his card catalogs, like the rookies, the inserts, the golds. I was trying to do that. It started where I decided to sell off the 2002 Finest X Fractor out of 20. I sold that to Austin. And then I was like, well, I'm going to get the gold anyway because I want to complete the gold run. So I sold it. And then I was like, well, I'm probably going to be, pissed later on that I sold this, but it didn't really matter. I was like, well, I kind of forgot about it. Then it came down to selling the 2006 gold X Fractor out of 10. I sold it to Austin because he's working on that set. I'm like, I'm going to get the gold anyway. It's a great card, but it's kind of a one-off. And I just want to complete these gold runs and get some other bigger cards of Warner. So I sold it to him. The first day it sucked. I was kind of like, wow, I shouldn't have sold that if I'm collecting Warner because it's like one of his bigger cards. But then I just kind of forgot about it again. I'm like, okay, well, if I can do that. And then I heard what you said. You were talking about moving on from some of your, out of 100 cards to really get into some of the bigger Favre cards that came up. I'm like, you know what? I've collected Warner long enough. Maybe I'll pick it up down the road. I've gotten some good cards of his. I was happy with what I did. There's another collector. I sold them all to him. He hasn't really displayed them on Instagram yet, so I'll let him do that. But he's probably the other biggest Warner collector that I know of. And I was happy to be able to help him with his collection. He bought all of them at once together, which anytime you can do that to a collector, you'll go for it. I wanted to help him out because I think now he's got the best Warner collection that I've seen. And with the cards that he already had, which were great, and then add these on. He's not a Packer. He's not a Brewer. I really want to get into some of the Brewer runs and some of the Brewer players and Packer players and runs. And I just felt like it was time. And, it's cards. At the end of the day, he's always going to take a back seat. So I felt like if I had the chance to move it to a collector, I took the opportunity.
That definitely lessens some of the sting. I mean, when I parted with my Randy Johnson PC, I sold it to Roundtree 13. He's a big Johnson collector. A lot of my kid cards went to kid collectors. Peyton, same thing. It just makes it a lot better to know that these guys will enjoy it more than I will, and it gives me the cap space to pursue, other cards for other PCs. There's really just no way, unless you're filthy rich, that you can sustain 6-7 player PCs with the cards that you and I like to buy, which are typically the more rare, that accordingly more expensive cards. And so at some point you have to make those hard decisions. And I did that recently with Corey Dillon, who I had gotten I think I had about 11, 12 cards of his, all, essential credentials, PMGs, the usual stuff. And biggest one was his 98 essential credentials future, which was numbered to 19. That was probably the most exclusive card of his that I had. But I just realized, look, I mean, with these Bagwells coming up, just some other stuff, wanting money for the National, I needed to make that move to free them up. And I got some of them to Dillon collectors. Some of them are going to auction. And like you said, I knew that I ranked all my PCs, and that one was last. And there was also one other thing that was kind of playing into my head a little bit, which was I had amassed this pretty significant bulk of Dillon cards, and it only took me a year. And it was almost like it was too easy in a way, which was that, his cards would come up, the rare stuff would come up, and there really wasn't that much competition. And I liked the cards because I liked the cards, but, I've read articles about the psychology of collecting, and one of the big reasons we do it is there is a competitive aspect, and, hopefully it's a healthy competitive aspect, but you want to have the best PC of a guy that other people want to have the best PC of. And so I didn't necessarily care that other people didn't want to collect Dillon, but it made the chase kind of boring, because it was just, I had almost completed everything I set out to get, with the exception of maybe the green PMG. And, that one, he's in a college uniform, so it wasn't something that I felt like I had to have. And I realized that, look, if it comes to it in the future and I want to restart that collection, they'll probably be accessible at that point too. And so I have not regretted closing down any PCs. I'll miss certain cards time to time, but I think if you keep honing your focus and you're just turning it into stuff you like more, then the decision is actually pretty easy. And then the last thing is, don't let collectors, guilt trip you about closing down a PC or selling off cards. Selling cards, whether at a loss or a profit, doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a flipper. It doesn't make you someone who's out to take advantage of other collectors or anything like that. So, I do sometimes feel that a little bit when I go to sell stuff and I'm like, well, people think I'm selling this because I'm trying to make money. But, at the end of the day, we're not millionaires and we don't have the money to just keep everything and keep buying more. So the best way to do it is to use your own cards to create more money for you to spend on other cards. So it was a big couple weeks for us, and I'm happy with the moves I made. I'm sure you are too. So let's move into the card of the week showcase. And this is really it's not one card, it's multiple cards. I thought this was kind of fascinating. This past Saturday on June 15th, there were 31 total 1998 Crusade Reds, all baseball, all sold through Probstein. So I take it this was probably one consigner that sent all these in. All of them were raw, I believe. There was a Kerry Wood that was graded, but it didn't end that night. It might still be going. But we saw some crazy sales. And we'll have an episode in the future about 98 Crusade and its desirability and some of the intricacies with the executive proofs and samples and stuff. But I was going for a Jeff Bagwell, who's a call to arms in that set. And I think I had valued it at maybe $1,500 to $2,000, somewhere in there. Vlad Guerrero had gone for $1,800, and they somewhat comparable. Bagwell's a little lower typically. That one ended up going for $3,850, which blew my mind. Mo Vaughn was another big one, $860 raw. You did have a lot of kind of no name or smaller players in that $50 to $250 range. We had a big Ortiz, which was raw, but it had a print line through the top, $4,550. And then the biggest one was a Barry Larkin, which was jersey numbered. So 11 out of 25, I believe. $5,111 for that card, which was very surprising to me. And I know people say stuff about Probstein auctions. I'm not going to opine on that, but a lot of the other sales seem legit, and we've seen some crazy baseball sales recently on desirable sets. So assuming it gets paid for, it could be real. The prior highest sales on these cards were Griffey, Jeter, Bonds, and then Barry Larkin, is now like the fourth highest selling player in this set. So the 98 Crusade Red is probably one of the top 5 most desirable cards for a baseball player collector. So I wasn't too surprised by the fact that they were aggressively pursued, but some of the amounts really surprised me. Brian, did you make anything of these sales?
What was the Barry Larkin sale was shocking. I want to talk about that a little bit. But
$5,000.
Yeah. What was the biggest sale overall for one of those baseball Crusade Reds? Do you know what the highest was? A Griffey, I assume, or a Jeter?
Yeah, I think a Griffey PSA 10 had gone for $63,000, $60,000 a while back, but after that, more sold for less.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of these cards. They show up on some Facebook groups and in some of the 90s inserts and rare parallels groups. I see every once in a while they pop. As far as like Probstein, without getting into details about his, I've bid on cards with Probstein and I've gotten pretty good deals on them. So I don't, as far as like the numbers, I would agree that these are, I would assume that these are legit. I think a lot of the issues that you see with like some of the Probstein auctions that maybe would, get higher amounts are that there's people that like maybe collect a specific set or player or card, and they see the thing up for auction on Probe Scene, and they might, if you get enough people to do it, they might shill the bid or throw in bids, obviously without Probe Scene knowing. So I know he's over the past years he's gotten some heat for their auctions, but we have to assume that these are legit sales. And I mean, if they are ran up, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll find out if they were paid, eventually. But I mean, if they were ran up, if they're paid, I mean, they're legit. So I think that Larkin is just crazy. I don't know if I've seen a Barry Larkin card like that go for that amount. I know it's jersey number, but still, I mean, that's a testament to that set. That Crusade Red set is getting more and more popular. You start seeing more are sold, but it seems like every time they sell, they're hitting new highs, no matter what the player is. It seems like it's an increase in price every time they sell, and they're selling more, kind of like how the 24 carats are selling more because they're getting more popular, but this set's kind of following that same suit.
Yeah, I agree. That's the second highest selling Barry Larkin ever, according to Card Ladder. The only one that was higher was a 1988 score error card that sold in January of 2023. So, this set is, just going back and reading about it and having collected in that era, this was definitely one of the most desirable sets around that time frame. And that hasn't quite taken the same trajectory in football. And, obviously there wasn't any in basketball, but it'll be interesting to monitor the Crusade market going forward. So let's get into listener questions. Brian, you want to start with the first one?
All right. So the first one that we got is from Retro Basketball Breaks. And this one's for you, Zan. It's, when it comes to buying rare cards, what's the difference between getting a good deal and taking advantage of sellers? And where is the line drawn?
I really like this question. I go back in my head to this classic example of guy goes to a yard sale. This woman is selling her deceased husband's baseball cards, and he's rifling through the box. He finds a 1953 Topps Mantle, not a 52, 53. And, he looks at it. He's an experienced vintage collector, has an eye for grading. He looks at it, says, this is pretty good. Good grade, a 3, 4, 5, at least a 3, at most a 5. Checks the comps on his phone, sees that would put it at about $3,500 to $8,500. And he goes to her and he says, how much do you want for it? She said, I don't really know much about cards. My husband was just a collector. How about $100? He says, yep, sure. Pays her $100 and walks off. So what obligation is he under in that situation to at least tell her the value of the card? This is absolutely a gray area, and there's people who are going to be on both sides of the fence talking about it. Now, I think the situation is different if he goes to the same woman and he makes the same assessment and then says, how much do you want for it? And she said, well, I don't know anything about cards, but I asked around, I called my local hobby shop. I think $1,500 is fair. And he thinks, well, that's a really good deal. Okay, I'll take it for that. Obviously, you could see the difference in those two situations, not only in price, but in the fact that this woman did her research and learned information about what it was. So I think when you're dealing with a professional who makes his or her living doing this, or just sets up regularly, someone who's interested in the hobby, even if they're not a dealer by nature, I think the responsibility is on the seller to know the value of his or her cards, and any mistake that's made is that seller's responsibility. But when you get outside that context and it's a seller who may not understand the ramifications of what this card is, I think there is some obligation, some ethical obligation to at least try to educate them on that and say, you know what, why don't you do some research? I'm not going to tell you what I think it's worth. Why don't you do some research and come back and maybe we can discuss this next week. I just ask that you give me first right of refusal to purchase the card. Because in the first situation, there's no asymmetry of information. There's no disparate bargaining power between the parties. And in the second situation, you could you could see that a little bit more. And interestingly enough, just had this experience with the Jeff Bagwell Gem Masters. The guy who had it was a former collector, but had not collected in a long time. And he did not really know or have a value in mind for the card. He did some research, though, and sent me the 99 Gem Masters Jeter on the fly subset, which went for like, I don't know, $45,000. And, he also used the old Randy Johnson comp from 25 years ago. So I look at it as like, the guy did research. I didn't rip him off by any means. Like, I still paid a good amount for it. Is it as much as it might be worth on the open market? Maybe not, but there's not really any way to tell that at the time of the purchase. So I think there's a lot of just gray area there, and you have to navigate it carefully.
Yeah, I
What do you
think too.
think?
There's also a line that would be drawn when it comes to if I'm going to a dealer's table, like at a show or something, and I'm looking through a value box where, a lot of these cards, especially 90s that we're talking about, they might look pretty close to the base card, or they might just get confused with the base card, or maybe the dealer, I've seen this too, the dealer or a shop owner doesn't really know 90s that well. So they just throw this stuff in a value box, mix stuff up. A lot of times these shops got kids sorting cards when they come in, they buy a collection, they miss a card. They just got kids over the summer sorting cards and they throw it in a value box. So in that regard, like if I pull something that, the old Kurt Warner rubies that I had was pulled out of a value box. I don't know. Nobody was told, the dealer wasn't told during that one either. So, if it's a dealer, if you're set up at a table, if you're a shop owner and you're running a business and you're selling something, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, differ, but if I see something that's significant in a value box, I'm going up to the counter, I'm paying what the sticker is on the card, and that's it. It's your job. You're running a business. That's your livelihood. I get it, but you also have an obligation to price stuff, because I don't go up to, shops really and just, go crazy on them because their prices are two or three over comps either. It's just, you're asking that price. If it's there, I'm going to pay it. So that's the difference. Shops. I also have shop experience where an owner was trying to get this Willie Mays off a lady who didn't really know the value of it. And they weren't trying to totally rip her off, like you mentioned, like the $100 sale, but they were saying, yeah, it could be worth this. It could be worth a few thousand. It could be worth this. And they were talking about the grading, and I could give you this amount of money right now, which I overheard it. And so did an older gentleman who was obviously a vintage collector. He's like, he actually stepped in and he told her to stop with the deal, which you normally don't hear in a shop, because he could tell the tactic that this person was trying to do, this dealer or this shop owner was trying to use, where he was trying to just undervalue the card to get a good deal and trying to persuade her to sell it to him instead of submitting it to PSA. So there's stuff like that. There's a lot of gray areas in here, but in the roundabout way, it's always protecting the collector and the buyer. And I would have no problem getting a good deal like that from a value box in a shop.
I was going to say some of the best stories are, because of the fines and those value boxes. The 99 Favre Gem Masters was pulled out of a dollar box. And someone recently got a 98 Bonds PMG that she found for, I don't know, $100 or something crazy like that. So I agree with you there. This next one's for you. This is from Galactic_Ape_Cards. He says, will people look at Panini's products 30 years from now like we look at 90s cards today? Is it just a matter of nostalgia, or is it a matter of the players and the sport in that era, or the actual product?
I don't like making the market projections, but just from my experience, the card market and the industry always goes through these shifts, where we saw it in the 90s, where it's a set that we're going to talk about later in this episode, in fact, is one of the earlier sets where it started the parallels and the, right at the cusp of the insert driven market. And when that stuff came out, if you remember reading old Beckett books, not everybody, but a lot of people were against it. And a lot of, older collectors were against inserts and parallels, that they were a gimmick, and cards are turning into a gimmick now, and no one will ever appreciate these cards or like them. And I remember even my dad, he was big into vintage cards, and he always would persuade me to, buy the rookie cards and buy the rookie cards. And I love that stuff. But, I have a lot of nostalgia for this 90s and early 2000s stuff because I couldn't afford the stuff I really wanted when I was a kid. And now I can, for the most part. So that's what I have nostalgia for. But with that being said, I think the caveat is during that time, companies were producing products that were really never seen before. I mean, why we love 90s, we talked about before, 90s and 2000s, all the different aesthetical aspects and the different set organizations and things like that, in my opinion, majority of them, the best parts of them are copied now. And there's not a ton of nuances with cards. Maybe that's because it's really tough. I mean, we've hit a limit on what type of aesthetically pleasing aspects to a card you can produce, or scarcity, rarity. I don't know what it is, but the 90s and early 2000s, they were doing something different. And maybe that's why there's nostalgia for those. When it comes to the Panini products now, I think I collect, this, and I've talked about it here. I mean, I collect Prism. I love Prism. I love Prism and Optic. I think they're great sets. Not trying to give like market advice or investment advice. I collect them because I think they're cool. They're big cards for this era, and the players that I liked watching, like Aaron Rodgers, if you want to collect him, like his best cards are in the Panini era. Same with like some of the 2010 to more modern Packers. Like they have the Panini era cards are the ones that to collect. So I think the Prism brand and the Optic brand, certain parallels, the golds, the blacks, the vinyls, those are going to have a lot of nostalgia. Those are going to have a big impact on the future market down the road. I think it has to do with the players too. Definitely, I think there's always player aspect. I think that'll go on forever, no matter what. There's always going to be nostalgia for players and sports. I would like to assume that the football market eventually is going to, I'm not saying go invest in football cards to flip them down the road. That's not what I'm saying. But, I would think that the football market would pick up in price even more than it is right now, where some of the cards that maybe you can afford now, you might not be able to get down the road, or it might be harder. So, I guess as far as like, the market, no one really knows. But I think there's definitely certain cards and certain products and players in today's Panini era that are going to be heavily collected and collectors will have nostalgia for moving forward. And I like the Prism Gold stuff. That's why I buy it. Not only because I love it, but I know like if I'm going to buy modern stuff, there's a million things you can buy. And you can like lose your mind now with what to collect if you want to get like, more modern Prism stuff. And I just want to focus on one parallel because it's really aesthetically pleasing. It's a kind of a throwback to, like I said, the parallels of the past, the gold refractors. I just think Panini did it better. So like for me, the gold Prism and the 101s, the finites are the ones that I would collect. And I think we'll have a really hardcore collector base moving forward.
Yeah, I think 100% true that people in the future, 30 years from now, who are kids now that can't afford some of these expensive cards will definitely come back to this era. I think it's the what that is challenging to figure out because there are so many more cards now than there were in the 90s. We go back, we look at 3 years of PMGs, right? And they're all very aesthetically different from one another for football, right? And basketball. But if you're in 30 years and you're looking back at 8 to 10 years of kabooms that have, gold parallel number to 10, but hey, wait, there's a horizontal to 10 as well. And then you've got the green 1 of 1, and all the aesthetics from year to year are pretty much the same with a tiny variation. Other than the Prism golds and finites and optic golds and maybe the select, field level or courtside golds, it's kind of hard to say what the desired cards will be because there are just so many options in Panini with the monopoly. Doesn't have a reason to pare down necessarily. They just keep printing and printing because they can sell more. So I think it will happen, but we just aren't sure what it's going to look like. All right, guys. I did have more listener questions. Thank you for everyone who submitted. We just for the sake of time, we'll move those to subsequent shows. They will be answered just not this week. So, all right, let's get into the main segment, which is 1996 Select Certified. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Can you guys see that okay?
Looks good.
Brian, looks good. All right.
Yep.
Well, today we are talking about 1996 Select Certified.
So before we get into the details of the set, we tried to get as deep as we possibly could with this set and its significance to the hobby. But explain a little bit about your specific background with this set, and then why do you love them, and why did you start getting into collecting these?
So I hit my, I think I started collecting in 97. So it was when Pinnacle Certified, the 97 version, was out, and then you had Totally Certified as well. Both were pretty expensive. Pinnacle Certified was piggybacking off 96, and then obviously 90, 95, 93, there was Select Baseball. It was when that started. So it was an expensive product. I think it was $5 a pack, and I was opening mostly Metal, Ultra, that kind of stuff. I may have opened one or two Pinnacle packs, but they were certified packs. They were more expensive, and so they were kind of not something as a kid that I was either into or really looking to or could afford, I guess. But, as time went on, I really gained an appreciation for the certified sets. Obviously, it's persisted. There's still Panini certified today. But 1996 Select Certified was sort of that was the first big year of the product. I know it existed in 95, but 96 is really where things changed, because this was the first year where, as you can see here, it says Chase the Rainbow. This was, I think, the first product to have 6 to 8 parallels, 6 in baseball, 8 in football, all of which had finite or defined announced print runs. And so, there were other sets, Collector's Edge made sets that had other parallels, etc. But I think this was the first one that Pinnacle made it a priority to reduce the amount of boxes produced, to make this a more exclusive, more premium product to compete with products like Finest and Bowman's Best, Bowman Chrome. So that is, I didn't collect a lot of it as a kid, but looking back at it now, it really triggers the nostalgia from that era.
Seeing this this set, you bring up the fact of the cards were $5 a pack, and my dad used to give me $25 to go to when we were at the card show, and then I would bring
That's
my own
pretty
money.
big.
But, yeah, I know. Well, yeah, I know it doesn't sound like much now, but back then in '96, and I just remember seeing these packs, mainly the baseball set. I wanted to get these packs so bad, and I would buy one every once in a while. I'd never get anything, so I'm like, oh, there goes $5 right there, and now I'm down to $20 or whatever I had left. So I know I always wanted these packs, and I bought a few of them, never pulled anything, but it just brings back memories when looking at the packs and the boxes, just that time when I was a kid, not being able to afford cards.
There's definitely a nostalgia component for me, even though it weren't something that I collected primarily during that time.
So when you look at this set breakdown, what do you see? Tell us a little bit about how these two sets are composed.
So football had 125 cards, baseball 144. Like I said, 6 parallels in baseball, 8 in football. And we'll get into why there was 2 additional ones in football. Both had 2 inserts, Select Few in baseball, 1 in 60 packs, Interleague Preview, 1 in 42 packs. Football Gold Team, 1 in 38 packs, and Thumbs Up, 1 in 41 packs. They're nice inserts. We'll look at them on the next slide, but that's not the chase element of this product. When you look at football, you've got the base variation, which just looks like a basic Chrome card, platinum behind the player, which you would maybe look at like a base prism kind of. And then you had an artist's proof, which was a variation of that said artist's proof, 1 of 500 on it. Of course, it wasn't serial numbered. It was just telling you that there were 500 of those made. And then you had a blue and red copies in football, both of which were matte versions of the base. I'm sorry, they were non-mirrors, basically. So they just were red or blue backgrounds behind the player. 200 blues were made, 2,000 reds were made. So the reds were pretty common. And then you start to get into the exclusive stuff with the mirrors. The mirror red, that has all the mirrors have a hollow foil look to them in the football. Mirror red was announced print run of 90. Now remember, these aren't numbered, but for the most part, people trust the announced print runs for 97. I'm sorry, 96 select certified. 97 is a different story. So mirror red was out of 90. Mirror blue out of 50. And you can see if you're looking at the presentation, there's a Terrell Davis. That's a mirror blue there. And then the mirror gold out of 35. So in the basic hobby pack, the mirror gold was the chase. And they also offered in football a premium stock box, which was a little bit more exclusive, more expensive. In hobby, you got, I believe it was 20 packs of 6 cards or 8 cards. I know we have it on one of these slides. And then in football, you had the premium stock, which offered 8 packs of 9 cards, I believe. And in those boxes were the only place you could find the premium stock base card and then the mirror red premium stock. Premium stock base card was just the chrome base, but it had the Dufex printing on it, or technique used on it. We'll go into that in a second. And the mirror red premium stock was just the same Dufex technology on a mirror red, but there were only 20 copies of that. So that's considered sort of the biggest grail of the set over the mirror gold, which has 35 copies. Now in baseball, they didn't have a premium stock option. It was just artist proof 500, blue and red, and then you had the 3 mirrors, which were red of 90, which matches football, blue of 45, not 50 like football, and then mirror gold had 30, not 35 as in football. The difference is that there's no refractor finish on the baseball. It's more of there is shine, there's that refractor shine, but it is a matte version of the card, so you don't get a reflection if you're taking a photograph of the card. So that's kind of the main difference between the two. To me, the baseball, it's a little more gold looking around the perimeter of it. You could see here on the screen this Bobby Abreu. It's very gold versus the Sanders, which is gold concentrated more around the player. And by the way, we are not talking about hockey. Hockey did have a similar setup to baseball. If you want to check that out, go over to tcdb.com.
It's interesting too. I just wanted to add one thing about the last when you mentioned the inserts, that you can start to kind of see how this set is kind of conformed to how we see more modern sets where they have less inserts. And this is in an age where like it was on the insert boom. So like a lot of companies at this time were trying to figure out different insert sets to get people to buy cards, and they were adding all these insert sets. Whereas this set was like, we're going to do parallels of the base set and make them really interesting and appealing. And we're still going to have inserts, but they're going to be, limited. Whereas some of the other 90 sets around this time, I mean, we're talking like 5, 6, 7 or more insert sets and really no parallels.
Yeah, I think so the way I think of it is, and this may be totally incorrect, but at that time, like I mentioned, the products with which Pinnacle Select was trying to compete with, Finest, Bowman's Best, they had the refractor. Then the Bowman's Best in baseball had introduced the atomic refractor, and so those are obviously parallels of the base card. And so part of me wonders, well, they're seeing those are kind of the kings of the market. Do we need to make a product with parallels to compete? Because really, Fleer had the insert game down really well. I mean, you look at Ultra, they always had creative inserts in those products. And I think that Select Certified knew, well, Pinnacle knew, we know we need to put inserts in there. And we're going to use a little bit of technology. They used the Dufex, which I mentioned was on the premium stock. If you don't know what Dufex is, it's a pretty complicated process. It's an expensive process, which made these cards have a bit of a premium feel. They use a UV formulated transparent ink that creates this. It's almost interposed over the aluminum foil to create this distinction between the holofoil elements and almost this kind of matte finish. It's hard to describe, but it has great shine, and it refracts in ways that typical refractors don't. It has this nice prismatic effect. Some of the inserts didn't have that, just as the base premium stock didn't have that. But I look at it as, let's make a premium product that can compete with these other juggernauts that are really pushing the parallel game, and we're going to do something different, which is offer these colors instead of just refractor shine. We're going to give colors to the collector, and that makes up there's actually the quote unquote rainbow appeal there. Well, we talked about the idea of chasing the rainbow, and this became really difficult for people because you were used to seeing cards numbered to high amounts, like an elite numbered to 10,000, and even that to people seemed kind of rare because serial numbers were still in their infancy in the early 90s. But then when you come out with a product and you say, hey, we've got 3 or 4 parallels numbered to less than 100, good luck. That forms a really big chase element, allure of the set that nobody had really had before. And I suspect that a lot of collectors felt like, collecting and player collecting in particular is a little too easy. I can get any card of any guy anytime I want, pretty much. And then this comes out and it's like, wow, this is really exclusive. I need to make sure that I can land one of these. So because of that limited distribution component, that's why you had so few of each card. They literally made sure that they only distributed a certain amount to hobby shops, and they marketed it as a premium set. It was already a premium brand, but like I said, they wanted this to compete with some of the best brands on the market, and that's why they had it priced at $5 a pack.
And you have to remember the way that people realized prices back in the 90s during this time is with the early Beckett magazines. He would basically go around, his entire crew would contact, dealers, hobbyists, card shop owners in the areas around the country, and that's how they would get their pricing. So if there's not a lot of sales from those, contacts that he made and him going around to different shows around the country, the prices can go up based on 1 or 2 sales. You don't have this big marketplace that you do now back in the mid 90s. So these cards were rarely seen, around, even though people were buying them, obviously. But, a lot of times people probably didn't know what they had. And the only way to really find out that information about these cards was to read a Beckett magazine. And when they showcased them, when they first came out, to kind of learn about the parallels and that. So it was just a different era. And you have to keep that in mind as you frame out what we're talking about with this set. As far as some of the notable sales, we talked about notable sales in rare cards earlier with the Red Crusades, but tell us a little bit about some of these sales and who's selling high and what we've seen.
Yeah, so we've seen the biggest sale here is the Monster Jeter PSA 10, which is labeled a rookie card from 96. Mirror Gold sold for $288,000 in 2023. The previous high was $202,000 back in 2019. So you can see, even before the COVID boom, a card fetching over 200 grand was unheard of. I know some cards had certainly sold for that, but it was rare. Now you still have some decently high sales in football, right? Jerry Rice, BGS 9, the Mirror Red premium stock, $6 grand. Mirror Gold, Barry Sanders, SGC 9, 4,700 back in 2020. By the way, the Rice was in 2023. Obviously, these sales are nowhere close to the baseball, and similar with hockey. Similar sales to football, $4,500 for a Mirror Gold Wayne Gretzky in PSA 9 in 2022. I think maybe you feel differently. I think that there's something to be said that it's clear that the mirror gold is the standout baseball parallel. But with the football, I know that mirror red premium stock is the one numbered to 20, but it's almost like it and the mirror gold, the 35, are almost too close in print run, to the point that it creates a little bit of almost competition between the top two parallels, whereas the mirror gold to me is so far and away better than the mirror blue or the mirror red. But in baseball, mirror gold is king. We saw a complete set sell this past year in 2023 for $158,000. They were all graded by PSA, all 144 cards. Sealed hobby boxes in baseball, going for almost $6,000 back in COVID. And then you've got Kirby Puckett PSA 9 back in January 2019, sold for $6,378. The Puckett card from that set always sells for a lot, and I think the reason for that is Puckett's career ended in 95, so it's very, very probably his best card, the 96 mirror gold. And for Puckett collectors, and he has a lot of them because he's a great player and has obviously passed away, that's kind of the big chase card for him. So any thoughts from you on the mirror gold, mirror red premium stock intersection in football, and why maybe the sales are so much lower?
Well, that's why when I led into this, I kind of brought up the set that we talked about earlier in the show with the Crusade Red. So the Crusade Reds are out of 20, 25?
25.
25. And then the next closest parallel is out of what? 100?
100 purple,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, so you have your big discrepancy right there. And there, in terms of popularity, I mean, that was a popular set too. So, I mean, you can, a few years apart, but it was a popular set. And you look at this discrepancy in pricing there, as opposed to like your mirror red premium stock and your golds being pretty close. That's got to play a part, being the serial numbering so close, right?
Right. So just a few interesting facts here about the set. Number two, I already mentioned, mirror red premium stock and base premium stock could only be found in the premium stock boxes. You got 8 packs of 9 cards, and they were on a thicker stock, 24-point card stock. And funny enough, if you pulled one, you got a little white card that said, "Congratulations, you just pulled a premium stock card." So it was considered, even if you bought a premium stock box, not as though every card in every pack was premium stock. You could still get the hobby stuff in the premium stock box. But I think of almost like a modern day, a choice product where you can get some other parallels, but there are exclusive parallels like Peacock or Nebula or something like that that's only in the choice. I read an old article about that a Beckett employee had written, and said that when he was working at Beckett at the time of release, there were collectors who were sending letters and calling into Beckett. I guess this was in the age before email was popular, but they were offering to trade or sell their entire collections for a baseball mirror gold. And I think he said that's kind of when Beckett knew, wow, this set is going to be really popular. It's going to be one of the most desirable cards for a baseball collector in particular. And that mirror gold set we talked about on the last page, the 144 cards that auctioned on Golden Elite in this past December, was a master set that was given to the head of Pinnacle at the time. So that's why if you look at if the certification numbers, they're all, almost all sequential. And there was some scuttlebutt online about, well, these sheet cut or anything like that, but no one hypothesizes that there has been anything sheet cut. And I've heard from a reliable source close to the owner that this was a master set given to the head of Pinnacle at that time. And they, so the announced print run was obviously 30. Maybe there was a few extras floating around. I read a funny story from a guy named Jeff Morris, who was a former brand manager and product development specialist at Pinnacle. And you can find this article online. Just Google his name with Pinnacle first day and it'll pop up. But he was summarizing his first day and said he went into a board meeting and they were discussing 1996-97 Select Certified Hockey. And the release of that, it was a Monday. It was supposed to be released on Wednesday. And he said he raised his hand and said, isn't that set already out? And of course, they're thinking this new guy's an idiot. And I think the executive said something to the effect of, no, it comes out Wednesday. He says, no, I saw it this past weekend at a card show in Niagara. It's definitely out. And I say, are you sure it's the same one? Yeah, it's the same one. So the meeting finishes, and a couple of the executives pull him aside, and they tell him that Pinnacle employs this security expert who watches people at all times, and they were aware of the fact that I guess 2 dealers had taken executive sets. We don't know if executives gave them to them or how they got out, but the executive sets that were provided to the Pinnacle employees had gotten out early. And so I think at that point is when Pinnacle stopped issuing or giving executives their master sets. But I thought that was just a fun story about that. But at the end of the day, Select Certified 1996, excellent product, lives on today as one of the most collectible sets. You can find lower end players on eBay in Mirror Gold baseball or premium stock Mirror Red football for reasonable prices. Good players for good prices. So if you're interested in this set and you want to just get some cards, just see what they look like, you can get good players for under $100. So any other thoughts on the set, Brian?
Yeah, I did not know about that Mirror Gold baseball set. When we found that sale, I was going to ask you if you knew any other information about that set, because that's a pretty significant sale to have an entire set at Mirror Gold baseball. That was like the baseball card of that era. And just a Google search, everybody likes to go from time to time Google searching lists like best baseball cards ever, best football of this era. And if you do baseball, best 90s baseball cards, almost every list that's made from collectors or dealers or whatever, this set winds up on that list, because in baseball, again, that Mirror Gold, they didn't have a premium stock, right? They had less parallels, and nobody really saw cards like that of that Mirror Gold before. So to have an executive set or have a full set like that, to put that together by just ripping boxes or buying singles, it'd be nearly impossible based on the 60,000 box sale or case sale back in in the mid 90s. It's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised at the price, because it's 144 cards. It's only maybe a little over 1,000 per card, and we had just seen the Jeter do 288,000. So maybe time of year, but obviously it took a little work to break that up. But whoever bought it got a really good deal, and then those cards were split up and were sold. I had a chance at the Pedro and passed on that, and I don't know if I regret it, but I do want to get it at some point. But great set nonetheless. Glad we covered it. If you have any questions, additional thoughts about 1996 Select Certified, feel free to send them our way, and maybe we can touch on them briefly in the next show. But Brian, do you want to give us a quick preview of next week? I know it's kind of redundant given that we've already done it, but maybe just remind people what we're going to cover.
Yeah, we made our first lie in the Precious Metal Gents podcast where you said the Favre hierarchy and the discussion about the parallels was going to be this week. We had a little scheduling conflict. We had to bump it to next week. But next week, for sure, we are going to talk about the 90s parallel hierarchy and the 90s parallel tournament that Zan did on his IG story. We're going to have Ryan RV Cards to join us to talk about Favre collecting. And really, it's going to be our first episode focusing on Brett Favre, since that's our main PC player, and I'm really looking forward to that. So,
should be a great time. If you guys haven't followed us on YouTube, check it out. I would recommend, if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, maybe if you have some time, check out the video on YouTube, because we do have a PowerPoint presentation that we go through 1996 Select Certified, and it has pictures of all the good stuff. So anyway, we will see you next week.